Welcome to the Smart Factory Podcast, brought to you by Catalyst Connection, where every day we work to support manufacturers at the intersection of technology, data, and workforce development, turning today's factories into smart connected enterprise, powering the next generation of American manufacturing. This is the Smart Factory Podcast. But first, a word from our sponsors making this show possible.
In manufacturing, unexpected losses don't ask for permission. A single equipment failure, a liability claim, or a workforce gap can stop production, and your bottom line, cold. Henderson Brothers works with manufacturers who know that real protection goes beyond a policy. From property and workers' comp to cyber coverage and employee benefits, they build solutions around your operation, not a one-size-fits-all checklist. Personal, proactive, present. That's Henderson Brothers. Learn more at hendersonbrothers.com.
In manufacturing, the margin for error is razor thin. The decisions you make about technology, taxes, and operations don't just affect this quarter. They shape the next decade. Schneider Downs brings the deep industry expertise to turn that complexity into confidence. Big thinking, personal focus. At work for your business. Learn more at schneiderdowns.com/manufacturing.
Welcome to Catalyst Connection's Smart Factory Podcast. I'm your host, Petra Mitchell. Today we're with Doug Gudenburr of DMI Companies to see what modern manufacturing in the Mon Valley looks like today. From dumpster diving to AI-driven solutions, it's a story of sustainability and growth, and what it really takes to build a company that doesn't just survive, but one that thrives. Since the company is in the HVAC space, I think it's going to be pretty cool. Hello, Doug. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Petra. Thank you for having me.
So, Doug, I love telling the story of DMI Companies, especially the Ductmate plant in Monongahela, PA, right in the heart of the Mon Valley. And for some of our listeners that may not be familiar with our region, the Mon Valley is basically a large geography south of Pittsburgh along the Monongahela River, where for many years there was a lot of industrial activity located there. But over time, about 30, 40 years ago, a lot of that really left the area. So your company was founded in 1978, right at the heart of the time when large manufacturers were shutting down and communities were struggling. So can you take us back to those early days? How did Ductmate get started, and how has the company evolved into DMI and into what DMI is today?
Sure. Our founder, Peter Arnold, who was born and raised in Holland and later moved to Canada. He was a mechanical electrical engineer doing engineering consulting work for a living and got involved in many different things. But, certainly one of them was in some HVAC consulting. This was a time when the country has and was going through an energy crisis, first in 1973 with the oil embargo, and then, of course, in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. And so, costs were rising, things were becoming difficult, building was going on. And so, energy was expensive. And in HVAC duct systems, they can make up between 40 and 60% of a building's energy use. Duct systems of the time were leaky, the thought being that any leaks would be contained within the building's envelope. So, hey, we're conditioning something in there. And we won't even talk about what that means in reality to a building's comfort. But ducts were also quite large and dangerous to assemble. And, sometimes you'd be 30 to 40 feet in the air when they were required to be sealed. It was also a secondary step needing to take place after the duct was assembled. So, increasing the chances for somebody to get hurt, additional expensive labor, and then, of course, sealer costs. And so it was a long, drawn-out process. Peter had come up with what is known today as a slide-on flange, which is assembled into a picture frame, if you will, and then attached to the duct. During the manufacturing process, an integral mastic sealant was injected into the flange, which would seal the flange when the flange was put on the duct wall and attached, which was all done in the shop and on the ground, essentially. The section of duct would then be lifted up into the air and the 4 bolts bolted onto an already assembled duct run in a matter of minutes versus as much as an hour or more with the old connection. These flanges were made from galvanized sheet steel, so we're better to set up manufacturing in Pittsburgh, run for steel making around the world. So Peter moved his family to Pittsburgh from Canada and found two partners and started Ductmate Industries. When I started with the company in January of 1982, we had about 15 people. We now employ over 500 across 5 locations around the country. The early years started out great. The flange was a game changer for the commercial and industrial HVAC industry. Or commercial construction in the early 80s, well, as you alluded to in your opening, was hindered like most industries as a result of recession or business bankruptcies rose sharply and people shutting down or moving out, especially in the Mon Valley, which had been a hotbed for manufacturing oil pipes, glass, coal, metals manufacturing, etc. And so we were not isolated from this as we moved into the early 80s. There were times when we weren't sure our paychecks were going to clear. But Peter cared dearly for his employees, and we were able to get through it, which made us stronger, more resilient, and more of a family. We're all in this together. And that we've carried that through to, 40 some odd years later. It was not long before we had competition, and Peter knew that we had to manufacture more for the industry than just the flange system. So we began to look at manufacturing other ducting components, which brings us to today, almost 50 years later, 4 manufacturing facilities across the country, tens of thousands of SKUs, along with an historic office building located in downtown Charleroi. And the core of our business was built here in the Mon Valley. Our employees and our family who own us, now in its 3rd generation, which each was born and raised in the Mon Valley, is what made us who we are.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Doug, and that's even more history than I was even aware of. So I appreciate that background. And you touched on a couple key issues in terms of how the company was started based on rising energy costs, looking at some really key innovations in product and manufacturing operations. So it's really not unlike what we might be seeing today, some of the same issues. But I have to ask you, Ductmate was the first plant that got started in Mon Valley. You said you have 5 locations now across the United States. Okay, Doug, which one's your favorite?
Well, Monongahela, of course. I get choked up a little bit every time I talk about it, but that was the epicenter of the business, the epicenter of our headquarters is here, of course. Everything that we do out of that plant, we still ship over 68% of the product that goes out. It is a hustling and bustling, but it was an old combustion engineering centrifugal casting facility, 56,000 square feet when Peter had bought it. And I can remember walking in there for the first time just after they had signed the papers, him and his wife Rosemary. And I'm thinking to myself, what are we going to do with all of this? But you know what? That didn't last very long. 4 additions over the years. We're now at 205,000 square feet from 56,000 square feet. And we need more. We do have some property, and maybe we will, but we're talking about it all the time. So yeah, I'm very, very proud of that facility and very proud of the people that work there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a gem for that community and for all of us here, really, in southwestern Pennsylvania. Just to give us a little more perspective, you said after 50 years, you do serve the commercial construction markets, but your products now are very diverse. And I would like to ask you to just describe some of your core product lines, the markets you serve, and more importantly, I think, where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth for your industry, for your company? But I'm thinking about it is how can we then provide some guidance and information to other small and medium-sized manufacturers in the area that are also looking to grow their business and might see opportunities in the same markets that you serve?
Yeah, and we are certainly a storybook for people to understand our success and how we got there. And we sell products through wholesalers and rep agencies all over the world. But our primary market is in the commercial and industrial building markets across North America. Within a typical commercial air conveyance duct system, we manufacture just about every component from the air handler to the diffuser. including life safety products installed in duct systems such as fire dampers and ceiling radiation dampers, which close down the duct system, providing building occupants time next to the building if there's a fire. So we do a lot of those types of things. Our latest endeavor, which we're really proud of, was to get into building controls, which includes HVAC, lighting, occupancy sensors, and indoor air quality. Building controls is not new. However, traditional control systems are very complicated and require specialized technicians to design and install. They are also typically very expensive. With today's technology, we are able to leverage a platform that connects to most all equipment within a commercial building infrastructure control. Our controls utilize digital twinning and AI to autonomously monitor and control the building systems to optimize not only equipment efficiency, but also the indoor environment for comfortability and air quality. A building owner can make adjustments or approve a system recommendation from his or her phone from anywhere. And this really provides, basically hands-off, monitoring and allowing the system to actually run and optimize. You don't need a bunch of engineers and several building maintenance managers. Very easy to control. And all that can be installed by a general HVAC contractor. That makes it even better. So, you're not looking at very expensive installs, and it allows the general contractor to go in and actually service the building. So a lot of contractors service the buildings now. This is just in their repertoire now, being able to provide a service to a building owner, which is really a game changer. So, uh, indoor air quality and energy efficiency is the opportunity for growth well over the next many years. It is a topic. It's everywhere. People demand it. People are advertising when small businesses are looking for space. One thing that continually comes up is the indoor air quality. There's a lot of things associated with that. So, not only reducing energy consumption and providing great all-around indoor air quality, but you don't have to spend lots of money. You're getting what they tout as productive work environments. These are things that are going to go well into the future. And the industry's just getting there. It was dominated by very large special businesses, I should say. And it took a level of expertise to design and build these systems for building. And we like to focus on the small to medium-sized building stock, which is about anywhere between 100,000 square feet and lower, which is about 80% of the country's building stock. But typically, a lot of the building owners, they couldn't afford that. So we see this as being the next great opportunity.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yeah, and we're seeing that as well, as the demand for energy continues to increase in our country, and particularly in Pennsylvania, in our state, energy efficiency is becoming, hot again. It's interesting again. People are looking at it, and want to make good investments in how to improve the efficiency of their energy use and so forth. So I agree with you. I think that's a tremendous market opportunity for companies that are in that space. I'm glad you brought up it's kind of your latest innovation, because that was going to be my next question for you. Over 50 years, your company has introduced many innovative products. And just wondering if you could touch on what's your approach to innovation? How do you identify these opportunities, and how do you decide what you're actually going to take to market?
Well, in the past, we used to spend a lot of time with the end user, contractors, design engineers, really to try and better understand their pain points. And remember, our palette, we go from making a flange, and there's all kind of components. So, we had the opportunity to really understand, their pain points, things that we could do to maybe help them improve on a specific product or just make products in general. Some of them need to. And that allowed us to, working with our direct customers, who really the wholesalers and the refs, they helped us pinpoint of this palette of products that we could make, which ones were most important to them. We could come up with a consensus, and we would make these things along the way. You know, in today's environment, we still take that same approach. However, our business has matured enough that I like to, when we start talking about, I'm with my sales group, we start talking about products and innovations. But, we in a digital world, we're connected in all aspects of our business. So what we're finding um, is that, our business is mature and competition, developing new products has increased focus, but manufacturing excellence, they're tied together. Continual improvement through lean practices, leveraging Industry 4.0 and 5.0 concepts, digital technologies, to not only run your operations and manufacturing, but, our business. So to mature and be successful, the focus has to be on the whole business. Now, I say that because developing new products and services is crucial, but is it making sure you stay competitive and keep your costs and controls? But many times we find that these are interrelated. So this latest innovation of building controls, we now feel confident that we understand through our manufacturing side the technologies and the things, the possibilities that can be out there. We build automation teams, so our lingo in our world is pretty much the same across all departments, which allowed us to start talking about getting out of just bending metals and roll forming metals, and actually getting into staying in the same industry, but being able to get into the technology side.
Yeah, that's great advice, Doug, in terms of, innovating in products and services, but making sure that the manufacturing and production side can keep pace with those innovations. So, is there a particular, I know you've been telling us about the latest innovation in terms of the innovative building controls, but over a 50-year span, is there really a particular product or breakthrough that you think was really pivotal to the growth of DMI?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to what I was just saying. Like, we've made a lot of products, and we've done a lot of things. We've gone into some industries. Maybe we'll mention them a little bit later, but uh, I'm proud of all of them. But this latest um, breakthrough that has really defined our company, I believe, and especially moving forward, is digital technologies. And I say that because, again, it allows us to run the business, but we can also utilize and leverage the technologies for new products, for better manufacturing, efficiencies, workflows, all of those things that I think will allow. So in the future, because we're becoming more adept and more conscious of the digital technologies out there, I think, we're going to look at how we can incorporate that in services and products to further go down those. So I think this opens up the door to allow us to do that. And I think I'm really proud. It was certainly a pivotal event going back 10 or 10 or more years when we really started to play around with this stuff. It has really changed the company, the look of the company, how we operate, how we feel, and more importantly, where we think we're going to go and what we're able to do at this point. We feel very comfortable with this technologies.
Yeah, Doug, your company has just been ahead of the curve on technology adoption from my vantage point and what I've observed over the years. Another area where I feel that you have been ahead of the curve is around sustainability. I know that it has been a major focus for your company, and you were the first company in Pennsylvania to achieve zero waste to landfill. And I know that's something you're very proud of, and I was very proud of you for doing that as well. Can you talk about that? How did you accomplish that, and what has that meant for your business?
Yeah, so uh, that goes back to 2011, and you have to consider that we, again, are very conscious of our employees. We're very conscious of the communities in which we operate, work, live, and play in. And, we always try to do the right thing. There's cost cutting. And excuse me, the word sustainability may scare some people. They think it's going to cost, and what do you truly get out of it? Well, it's being responsible, and there are cost savings. And we started as just part of our culture looking at ways that we can reduce costs, but also be more conducive to the environment in our future. And, look at dumpsters coming in and out of our place, way back, just nonstop, because packaging comes in and it's, people in the mentality just throwing things away. So we started to look at this, and, we had been involved with the Green Building Alliance here in Pittsburgh for a number of years prior to that. And we went to a conference in which they challenged us, and they said, you know, why don't you consider this? And I raised my hand and said, we'll do that. It's worth the effort. And we said so they called it a BHAG, right? Big audacious goal, hairy goal, and we ended up doing it, and said we'd get it done in 5 years. It took us a little longer than 5 years. It took us 7. But we did the dumpster dives, and it really started out as, okay, where can we reduce the trash leaving? And we would go through, garbage cans and dumpsters, and separate things and look at, hey, we can make things happen here. We get in touch with our vendors and look for less packaging. Do we really need to be throwing gloves away every day and getting a new pair of gloves? Those types of things. And then as we were moving through this, it really started to pick up momentum. People felt empowered, so much so that it was great, because people would go home and they were practicing it at home. So we knew that the culture was shifting, and so within 7 years we became silver certified true zero waste to landfill, and we are now gold status, working our way to platinum. Our office building is Energy Star, and it continues to pass Energy Star. And in fact, we accumulate more points every year. So we're very proud of that, and we've pushed that out to our other facilities. Our facility in Oklahoma is true certified zero waste to landfill, and so is our facility in Virginia.
Well, congratulations. That's fantastic to hear. And I continue to believe that you're quite a role model for other companies on this journey. So thank you for that. And one thing you just mentioned that's very important, I think, is the people empowerment. And that's kind of the topic I'd like to talk about a little bit with you. I know that workforce is one of the biggest challenges for manufacturers, especially in this region. You, in particular, operate with a union workforce. So, how have you built this strong collaborative relationship with your union partners? And, what are some of those more innovative approaches that you've used to recruit and develop talent, which, is a big challenge for every company in this area?
Well, I can promise you that, it wasn't it was a little bit more adversarial years ago. The union leadership at that time and the company trying to grow, and being pressed on cost issues and people, so we did have, we used to have some battles. But, as time goes on, and certainly as the industries in commercial construction goes up and down through its dynamic process and cyclical processes, um, we figured out together that we have to work together. And we're not always going to get everything we want. It's really about coming to a consensus and working with each other, because it's not only for the betterment of the company or the union, but of the industry, and all those types of things that make us successful. And we've been able to carry that. We operate, and we have 4 different locals that we work with across the country, and started here in the in our Pittsburgh manufacturing in Monongahela, and we have been able to take that same approach with the rest of them. And again, it was a little bit of a journey, but I think we've all started to understand that we need to work together. Now, the union has difficulty getting people into their apprenticeship program. We have a unique situation where we use journeymen from the union, so they serve their apprenticeship. But we also use what we call classified and production workers, which we can hire right off the street. Um, and we built a program where we bring them, and took a lot of a lot of uh, advice from Callis Connection, always there to help. And those are the types of things where we start to understand that we need to look for workers. We need to educate workers. It's not a matter of hiring somebody and throwing them on the floor and this is what you do. They need to understand your business. You need to you have to put them through some core competency training, and you need to spend some time with them when they first come on board, and that will really help them, integrate them into the business. They understand a little bit more. I can remember when I started, and it was a matter, yeah, you got a job, when you go in there. I didn't even know what we made for probably 3 or 4 months. I saw this machine running and steel's coming. And I think people want to know and they want to be part of it. And that again has helped our culture. So, we hired a workforce development manager a number of years ago, and she strictly works with the union side of the business and the operational side. And she is very good at making them feel at home, and very good at putting together a program. So when they come in, they do some competency training. They get integrated in, they spend time, they understand our sustainability culture, they understand our safety culture. Whereas again, prior to that, people started safety. Yeah. What does that mean? I just want to go, I want to go home. Yeah. Well, there's a whole program to keep people safe and understanding how that works. So we've been very fortunate, and it has paid dividends.
Yeah, that sounds great, Doug. I think company culture, employee engagement, strong onboarding practices, those are all some of those innovative approaches that we've been talking about over the years. So, yeah, that's great news. Thank you for that. So, as we wrap up our conversation here, Doug, I know you spent a significant part of your career with DMI. You mentioned it earlier, almost 40 years, I believe. So, that's fantastic. Congratulations. What brought you to the company, and what do you think's kept you there?
Well, it's a good question. Uh, you know, it's funny how I got the job. My mother and Peter's wife, Rosemary, worked together. And I was job hunting, and Peter was looking for people, and Rosemary said, "Hey, I work with a woman and she's got a son and he's looking for work, and I got the job." And I think, I was really impressed. I like working with my hands. I've done, we were small enough that I did a little bit of everything. So I got to work in sales. I did engineering. I did production. I did HR. I did whatever needed to be done early on. So that kept my interest, and I really liked it. It wasn't, repetitive day in, day out. This is what we do. Um, but what's kept me here is the family atmosphere. We've been through bad times, we've been through good times, we've celebrated together, we've lost friends, and acquaintances together, and we've really been able. But we look at what we've built, and I think we're proud of that. And as the years went by, um, you know, watching people come in and grow within the organization because we were growing and they had the opportunity to grow. I think these are all things that make you feel part of the fabric of a company. And for those that are willing, and we have many, most people come here, they don't leave. I think that's important. And I've just celebrated my 44th year. I'm not sure whether I'll hit 50 or not, but it's been a heck of a journey, and I wouldn't have traded it for the world.
Wow, yeah, that's fantastic. You don't hear about that too much anymore. People, spending an entire career with one company, and there's definitely a lot of advantages and benefits to that type of a career. So thank you for that. And Doug, thank you for everything that Ductmate and DMI Companies does for our community. Thank you for your service on the Catalyst Connection Board of Directors. You're very engaged, guiding us as well as others into the future. So we really appreciate that. And on behalf of the people, families, and communities in the Mon Valley, thank you for growing and innovating and keeping good family paying jobs in the Mon Valley. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure and my privilege.
That's all for today's episode of the Smart Factory podcast. Thanks so much for listening. If you found today's conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone in your network who's navigating the future of manufacturing. We'll see you next time. And before you go, a final word from our sponsors.
As a manufacturer, energy and operating costs add up fast. But what if a grant could help you modernize your plant and save money? Reducing Industrial Sector Emissions in Pennsylvania, RISE PA, offers grants to manufacturers with fewer than 500 employees. Eligible projects can receive up to $500,000 to install more efficient equipment that cuts emissions and lowers utility bills. Modernize your plant, reduce costs, and strengthen PA's manufacturing future. Learn more and see if you qualify at risepa.org.
Execution does not stop at your four walls. Even strong operations can fall behind if the supply chain is not keeping pace. KDL Logistics works with manufacturers to close that gap. From freight optimization and carrier management to real-time visibility and cost control, they help keep product moving without disruption. Learn more at kdllogistics.com.